Right, before I start, I should probably warn you this game has some pretty intense flashing lights and spinning images. I got some pretty bad eye strain, so I can't imagine this is the kind of game you'd want to play if you have a history of seizures. There's no real way of completely editing it out of the footage, and if you don't want to subject yourself to that kind of visual assault, you might just want to skip this game. Also, a warning to any headphone users who get this, the game likes to get unreasonably loud. Super Benbo Quest is an ironic shitpost, and it's easy to write it off as shovelware at first glance. If you're more generous, you might assume it's good for a quick laugh or two before being quickly forgotten. The Steam page doesn't really advertise itself as being anything else, but I think that might be selling Super Benbo a little short. With its MS Paint style graphics, I came into this expecting something on par with an old Flash game in terms of quality, but I'm not going to try and pretend this is a AAA experience, or completely jank-free. It's a legitimate platformer that punches above its value menu price. Actually, writing this review, I can't help but wonder if Super Benbo is intended as a throwback to Newgrounds-style content. The humor certainly has that sort of vibe, with its deliberate mistakes and non-sequiturs. It's what someone who never picked up a dictionary might call irreverent. So okay, maybe the ... joke wears out its welcome, but other than that, everything landed well. It's not just the humor and presentation that's giving me nostalgia. Super Benbo plays a lot like a more polished fan game from the late 2000s. For one, you've got a pretty simple set of moves, simple enough that you only need the arrow keys in the classic AS pair, one to jump, the other to hit things. You've got a basic attack that you can use on the ground or in the air, as well as a downward diagonal kick. If you hit left or right twice, you start dashing, allowing you to do a sliding punch or a spin attack if you're airborne. And that's really all there is to the controls. The level design reminds me of those intentionally frustrating games you'd find a lot online. You know, the kind where you step forward and get killed by something you'd have no way of knowing about unless you already fell for it before. It's not really fake difficulty here though. The game is so generous with checkpoints that death isn't really much of a setback, and you don't have any lives to worry about. If anything, it plays a bit too easy because of this. You can just damage sponge most of the game's challenge. It's not all trial and error gameplay though. What really surprised me about Super Benbo was the actual platforming. It's nothing revolutionary, but controls a lot better than the NES era games it's emulating. It's not always the main focus, and there'll be a few areas where you're simply headed to the right while punching skeletons. But a few levels feature platforming more prominently. At times you're going to have to get through some pretty tricky obstacles. This is where most of the game's challenge comes from. The controls are responsive enough that I felt pretty confident on what I could and couldn't do. Your attacks, and particularly your kick and spin, will give you a few more options when navigating levels. It's all very fluid and precise. I just wish the game leaned into this aspect a little more, but it's great as it is. The only real issue I have with the platforming is when it comes to two specific sections. One where you're being chased by a helicopter and it seems impossible to completely avoid taking damage, and another really specific area during a motorcycle section where I'm pretty sure it's completely random whether or not you can make the jump. I've tried this section a dozen times and I've even watched other people's playthroughs. I still have zero clue what, if anything, I'm supposed to do to not die here. These two sections together make up about 1.5 levels, which, when I think about it, is kind of a lot because there's only 6 levels. But they don't really ruin the rest of the experience. The combat is, well, I found it works pretty well for the most part. Certain attacks lend themselves better against specific enemies, so there's some sort of strategy to it. Enemies will go down in a couple hits at most, so they, and in turn the combat, works as an additional obstacle for the platforming. The boss fights, on the other hand, well, they're my only real major gripe with the game. One of the biggest issues is that your moveset just isn't really suited for dealing with them. More specifically, the problem is you have to commit to all your attacks but the most basic one, and both the kick and sliding punch have long recovery times. The obvious answer might be to just not use them, but most bosses move too quickly for you to slowly walk up to and use your standard attack against. You're either going to miss your opportunity or get hit. There's some fights where the only way to safely do damage is to hope the boss decides to be in the right place or use the right move. It's not all the boss fights, and some of them are actually pretty fun to figure out how to beat, but the bad ones stand out. One last minor issue I had, your progress for the level select screen resets to the last level you played, meaning you lose access to any subsequent levels. I don't mind most of the bugs, but that's just obnoxious. Okay, this has gotten pretty long for a simple game that'll maybe last you 5 hours. So then, is Super Benbo Quest any good? I mean, I hope you've watched enough of this review to draw your own conclusions, but for simplicity's sake, yeah, I enjoyed it. I can't excuse the worst parts of it as being part of the ironic charm, but the bad is too infrequent to overshadow what's good. It's a funny meme game about punching skeletons that plays better than it has any right to.